What if the thing standing between you and a deeper connection with God this season was a simple pen and notebook? Today, I'm sitting down with my new friend, author Allison Byxbe, who I connected with through Podmatch, and she's sharing inspiration from her new book, Journaling as a Spiritual Practice. If you felt distance from God, especially when busy marketing your books, and you want to find your way back, you're in for a treat. So let's get to it. Welcome, Allison. I'm so happy to have you today on Book Marketing Mania to serve my listeners.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. So I was so thrilled to learn about your new book coming out, Journaling as a Spiritual Practice, Tracing the Lines of Grace to God's Presence. And Allison, tell us a little bit about your new book and who did you write it for and what do you hope your reader gets out of it?
Yeah, I really wrote it for women who are trying to process their right now, right here story. And for some of us, that might look like a loss or a grief of some kind,
Mhm.
maybe a transition, maybe just a new life season where there's questions and uncertainties. And I know for me in my own story that when there's questions and uncertainties, sometimes it makes it hard to experience God's presence. And so I wrote this book for women who feel some kind of distance or separation from God and just really want to get back into his presence and and experiencing that in some real tangible ways. Because I know for me, the presence of God has been the game changer. Whatever life has thrown my way, that has been the constant and the steady and staying connected to him.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Me too, for sure. And that's what I wanted to ask about. Like as an author and as a writer as well, when life does get in the way of that, we feel like we have this calling to share these words and share these stories, but then our everyday life sometimes bumps into that and cuts into our time with that as well as our time with God, right? The circumstances in our lives may pull us from that. So, how can, journaling as a practice really help us with that?
Yeah. Well, what I love about journaling is it literally could take a 50-cent notebook. You don't have to have anything fancy. There's no special requirements. There's no grammar police coming after you. It really is just pull it out and show up on the page. And whether you've got 5 minutes or 30 minutes for whatever you've got, it's valuable and it's meaningful. And that's what I love about it is I don't have to set aside hours at a time. If I skip a few days, like whatever, it's always available and ready and waiting as a way to process life and to pray, to connect with God, to ask the hard questions, to be honest in a way on the page that I think is hard for a lot of us to maybe be honest with other people because that's just between me and whatever's on the page.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And I was thinking, like, back when we were talking about, both of us have special needs sons. And I was thinking, like all those years of like going to doctor's appointments, going to a therapist, where you had some time while they were, in a therapy room or something, or you're waiting in the car to pick them up at school. Like, there's so many opportunities that I wish back then I would have taken advantage of something like this, like just a little bits of time to just, crowd, like we crowd in prayer. But sometimes, like you said, sometimes we want to process it on paper and we might say things differently and think about our thoughts differently. And so this is one of my big hangups. So this, Allison, so I wanted you to talk through this because I'm hoping I'm not alone in this. But my biggest fear of like probably writing stuff down like this. I mean, part of it's probably just like seeing in black and white what I'm thinking.
Right.
But the bigger thing is, what if somebody reads this? Like I'm so scared. Like if I leave my notebook around and somebody reads it, like what are they going to think of this journaling I've been doing about these issues I'm having? So talk us through that and coach us through that.
Yeah. You are not alone. I talk to so many women who that's their fear. So there's one lady in particular in my journaling community who has a paralegal background. And she said, Allison, she's like, you don't put things in writing because that's what gets you in trouble. And I was like, I hear you. I hear you. So I think you do have to find some ways that you feel comfortable that your privacy is protected. So for me, I have a little nightstand that has a lock, and all my journals stay in that little nightstand where I can just lock it up and know that I'm the only one that has access to that. Other people, they will decide after a certain amount of time, you know what, I'm just going to shred or burn or get rid of this journal. Now I've written it all down. I did that process and it was great, but I don't want the paper trail. And so they decide to get rid of it. So I think that there are ways, but it's kind of different for every person, just
Mhm.
depending on, their comfort level and how far they want to go to keep things protected and private. And, in my house too, my family knows like these are mom's journals. We don't touch those.
Mhm.
Those aren't ours. And so we do talk a lot about like respecting other people's boundaries and privacy and things like that, even when it comes to the things that they write down. So I think there's some real simple solutions like a locked cabinet you can put them in, all the way up to the more, like I'm just going to get rid of this journal once I'm done writing in it. Or some people like to keep it even on their phone, like in their notes app or something. That's
Mhm.
perfectly good too, because usually you're the only one who's got access to your phone. And so, yeah, I think there are options, but it is important to think through for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea just to think through, what am I using it for? As well as I'm sure there's people out there that would do it like I want to leave this behind. I want my kids
Yeah,
to someday, find
yeah,
my journals and be able to
yeah.
read them. But I'm not sure I want them to doing that today. So I'm glad to
Long and
know I'm
gone.
not alone in that.
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
so for those of us that, I mean, everybody's going to say they're short on time, right? But for those of us with, limited spots of time in our day, how do you suggest we get started in a super simple way? And so, we can start this practice, but also not beat ourselves up too much that there is some perfection involved, because like you're saying, there's not.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, one of the best things I've done is my journal, I can take it with me anywhere because it's a smaller size. It fits down in my purse or my bag. And like you were talking about in kind of the cracks of your day, whether it's waiting for an appointment, for me, I still do car line and have to pick my kids up. And there's always a forever long line for that.
Yeah.
But I just keep it with me so that when I find 5 or 10 minutes, I've got it, I can pull it out and I can write it down. I think another piece of it though too, it's kind of similar is keeping your journal visible, keep putting it out on your nightstand, keeping it somewhere where you're going to see it and remember it and go, oh, right, I wanted to do that. Because sometimes it's just out of sight, out of mind, right? But I just tell people if you've got 5 minutes, I know that doesn't seem like a long time, but most people are surprised at how helpful and meaningful even just 5 minutes of writing down your thoughts, whatever's on your mind that day, putting it down on paper and giving yourself permission that 5 minutes is really fine. It's really okay. The important part is you showed up to the page.
And I don't want to get too in the weeds of your book because I want everybody, I'll be sure and put a link so everybody can check out your
Sure.
book. But is there some like beginner prompts you would recommend? Like for those of us that aren't like, we sit down with a blank page, it's like sitting down to try to write a book, right? Or some people are better about just sitting down and started writing. But for those of us that maybe need a little bit of hand holding, how do you suggest we
Yeah.
get started with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think so many people do struggle with that kind of blank page syndrome of just, there's so much going on up here. I don't even know how to pull the first thread and get it down. And so I'll give you an example from something that's really helped me. It's a really simple framework for when I'm maybe struggling with a decision or something that's happened and I don't like it or I'm disappointed in myself and I'm just having a really hard time kind of maybe moving past it. I do this really simple um, it's a curiosity, it's a grace, and a reframe. So,
Oh.
why am I struggling with this? Can I just be curious?
Mhm.
I don't have to judge myself or shame myself, but can I just ask, what might be going on here with this issue? And then I bring in God's grace. Like, what's God's perspective on this? Or, it's reasonable that that feels difficult, or, I missed the mark on that. And there's some reasons why, just whatever that grace can look like for yourself. And that's a skill, right? Like, it can take some
Mhm.
skill to give ourselves grace, but
Yes.
even just having that word on the page, what's the grace here is really helpful. And then once I've kind of explored that curiosity, what's going on and how can I apply God's grace here? Then it's the reframe. It's like, okay, well, how can I see this differently? Or how can I move forward now that I've unpacked it a little bit through that curiosity and grace framework? I think that's a really simple way because you just got to remember 3 words:
Mhm.
curiosity, grace, and reframe. And then you're good.
Yeah, and then get started. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, that makes it so much easier. And like you said, it's different for everybody. But yeah, some of us need a little hand holding to get started. So
Absolutely.
let me ask you this, Allison. Would you say this is a journal for people that already believe in God? They already have a relationship with God? Or do you feel like it's something that somebody that's curious about what all that means could start with?
Yeah, I definitely think it could be for somebody who has curiosity. about God. I don't think you already have to have it all figured out in terms
Mhm.
of what you believe or even figured out, what's your relationship with God like. We look at some specific places in scripture where God kind of shows up, his presence shows up, and we explore what does that look like without the pressure to, have all the answers necessarily, but just to say, well, this is how he showed up here. What does it look like, or what might that look like in my life, And the
Mhm.
answer might be, I haven't experienced that, or I don't really get that or understand it. And I think that's totally okay because the book is an invitation to explore what that can be for you without the
Mhm.
pressure to have it all figured out.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, the reason, I mean, well, there's multiple reasons why I wanted to ask you that about that, but I was wanting to ask you about Podmatch, where we connected, and I'm so thrilled that we were able to, make a match on that platform, super easy, and get you on the show. And I was just thinking about, it's such a great way for host and guests to connect. But I was thinking, like, your book could reach so many people that maybe you didn't really think about writing it for, But it is the curiosity, the seekers. And there's so many shows that are pouring into those, listeners.
Mhm.
And so I love that now you're getting exposure to that. Well, let me back up. I did want to ask you, Allison, about you mentioned your community, and that is something I did not discover, is that you have a journaling community. So will you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I realized how healing journaling was for me, I started just thinking, well, gosh, can I help other people do that? Are there other people who might even be interested? And so I said, well, let me just put the ask out there. And if I'm going to ask people if they want to do this, maybe we need a place to show up. And that place became what I call the Inky Collective. And I put up weekly journaling prompts there. We have conversations around those prompts. We have conversations around our lives and what's going on. And it's just a way for people who want to be intentional with their journaling. It gives them a place to show up to do that with other people who want to as well. And then twice a month on Saturdays, and this is open to anybody, whether they're in the Inky Collective or not, but I do a 40-minute guided journaling session on
Mm.
Zoom 2 Saturdays a month. And it's just show up with your journal and pen, and I'll bring a prompt. And we all write in our journals with that prompt and then have a little conversation at the end. Just how'd that go? So those are the places I'm showing up and inviting people to come into because we think of journaling, right, as a something we do by ourselves and it's a super private thing. And I really agree. But what's really cool to watch is when people start interacting, maybe not sharing what they wrote down in their journal, but just how that prompt was meaningful for them or some insight they gained or whatever. It really, I think, gives us inspiration to keep going in our own journals too, because it puts a little wind in our sails hearing how other people are understanding their own lives and stories and processing them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, I'll be sure and get your link from you for your community because I love that you have a place for everybody to gather and that you are being so generous with your time to do that on Zoom on Saturdays. Gosh, I know a lot of people will be wanting to check that out. So let's talk about Podmatch. So I would love to hear about your journey of how you got started with Podmatch guesting there and just what your experience has been like.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I have heard in the publishing world is that being a podcast guest is just a great way to connect with other people, to have really fun conversations and, to spread the word, whether it's a book or whatever it is that you've got to offer people as a resource. And so I was doing a Google search. I mean, this is so basic, but I just was doing some research on like, what does it take to be a guest on people's podcasts? And I read somebody's article about Podmatch in particular. And I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so a few months ago, I signed up and filled out the profile and then just started, some hosts reaching out to me reaching out to some hosts as well. And just seeing, would this be a good fit? Could we have a conversation that would benefit their listeners? And I've loved it because I've been able to connect with people that ordinarily I may not have crossed their paths. So
Mhm.
it's been a fun experience. I've loved it a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that because that's what I was thinking. Like, I don't know why we haven't connected before,
Yeah.
and seeing, yeah, they had a book coming out with Moody, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I should have known about this book. So, yeah, I'm so thankful for a platform to connect us. Well, this has been so good, Allison, and I will be sure and put a link to your book and your community in the show notes, and as well as ways to reach out to you online. And I just thank you so much for your time. It's been so great today.
Yeah, Kim, thank you so much. It's been so good to be here and just to get to talk about the thing I love the most, which is journaling. So thank you.
Oh, I just loved connecting with Allison, and I pray this conversation inspires you to pick up a little notebook and pen and spend just a few minutes this week getting closer to God. Joining me next episode is another new friend from Podmatch, author and fellow podcast host Jennifer Bosma, and she's sharing her Wish I Knew Back Then tips for both hosting and guesting on podcast while growing your author platform. Thanks for tuning into Book Marketing Mania, and as always, I'll be there for you next episode to help you reach and serve your readers one podcast at a time. See you then.